I'm Jeff Huffine from Iron Gate Creative. I'm glad to be here today. And you know, it's kind of interesting when we set out to start to put our presentation together. It's like I was wondering, I was very curious about who was going to be coming today and what you're looking for when you come to an event like this, right? So first of all, raise your hand if you have a website. Do you have a website? Okay, good. So a majority of you do then. That's good. And so, you know, isn't it scary having a website? It could be very scary. Trying to create relevant content for it. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today is, you know, the responsibility of having a website and trying to keep it updated is very important because guess what happens if you don't? You know, you get judged by your customers, by who you do business with. It's like a big reflection. You know, if you look at what happens today with websites, everybody goes to a website to pre-qualify someone, don't they? I mean, that's the first thing I do is I go and I'm going to find out so much about you by your website. So it's become really, really important. So I'm going to give you some scary stats today too. You know, scary stats because of how important your website is becoming and why it's important. And so what I thought I would do is kind of talk about five areas or 5 topics today. So so what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to go ahead and get into the first one. But here's the thing. Let's just pretend today. Let's just pretend that you have a new website. And it's slick, right? And it's got all the bells and whistles. Like it runs clean, it's fast. It's organized, but that's no guarantee that anybody's going to come to it. Because I've had customers think that's all it takes, is to build a website and then Shazam, right? So where is everybody? That's not how it's going to work. And so that's the first important step. So we're going to make some assumptions today in our presentation. We're going to assume that our website is like current technology, okay? Because that's the other thing that we could talk about today is sites that have gotten old. You know, what's the life cycle of a site? Anybody know? What's the life cycle of a site? You might want to take a guess. 4 years maybe, 5 years? You're probably pushing it when you get to that age. So, and if you're not doing, and I'll talk about it today, if you're not doing updates to your site and keeping it clean and keeping your content very relevant, it gets outdated even faster. So we'll touch on that too, right? So the big fear here is that just because you build it, that doesn't mean people are going to come to it. And that's what I want to talk about today, is what can we do to help drive people to our site. And here's the thing, it's not just about your website, okay? How many people here do social media? Can I see some hands? Just about everybody's doing social media, right? Social media is so important because what happens with a website is that you reach out, you try to find who your target audiences are, you try to find out where they are, you try to have a presence where they are. The whole thing is to pull people back to your website, right? Pull people back to your website. Why is that important? Anybody have any idea? Why not just give people all the information they need on your Facebook page or on your Instagram page? Why is it not enough time? You can't control how often they see it.
You can give them more information on your website.
That's true too. You can give them more information. The big reason is that Google's keeping track, right? Google Analytics. And so search engine optimization, have you heard of that phrase, SEO? So Google, every time someone visits your site, Google's scoring it. So the more people visit your site, you've heard people talk about rankings and how when you search, if you do a keyword search, how do people's sites show up there? Like how do you get, everybody wants their site to be in the top 10, right? So it comes up on the Google page. What's important here is that you drive all your traffic to your website. and everything lives on your website, okay? So you're reaching out with social media and you're pulling people back to your website. It's really important. So if you build it, there's no promises that they'll come. So the first act, act number 1, review your social profiles. So what am I talking about? Anybody have any idea what I'm talking about when I say review social profiles? Let's just, a social profile could be a Facebook page, an Instagram page. How many social profiles are you on right now? I'm just kind of curious. 4. Anybody doing 4 social profiles at least? 3? 2? 1? Any? Okay. So review your social profiles. What's important here is that you're like really professional, okay? So what's important here is like your photos, your logos, all that stuff that you do that promotes your company or promotes you individually. They need to be consistent. They need to be consistent across the board. If you're running more than one social profile, you need to make sure that you're consistent with, if you want to call it branding, I'll talk about branding here in a minute. We can call it branding or your identity, right? Just how people learn about you and know your mark, know what you are. So you need to be consistent across all your social. Because people are pre-qualifying you. If you're not consistent, what's the first thing they're going to say? You're not consistent, right? You're not professional. What's happening?
Losing business.
You're losing trust. You're losing trust. So that becomes really important. There's just kind of a scary, who does this? Anybody do this?
I think that's low.
Probably is. I mean, I use my phone. Well, first of all, let's don't call it a phone, okay? Let's just agree it's a computer. That's what it is. So I use my computer to talk to people. I use my computer as an alarm clock. I mean, think about, and this is what we talked about when we were I went to the Google session, and you know that was one of the things that they touched on a lot. Who all here went to my business, Google My Business? So you know, remember she talked about how your phone has become so much more than how it's replaced. You know, how it's a disruptor in a way, right? It's just replaced so many different tools that we use. And so it's just like, it's with us all the time. So your website and your social profiles, they all become so important. So yeah, I mean, I'm probably one of those people. I mean, I don't like sleep with it, but it's right there by my bed on my, you know, on my side bed there because of, I use it as an alarm clock. And a flashlight. Use it a lot. So, I wanted to show you this. So this is what we call an Amazon mood board, okay? Anybody here ever heard of mood boards? Or a branding board? So like if you were going to do a branding board for yourself or for your company, you start to create what we call a visual palette, or a set of visuals that might represent you. And then you could take those visuals and use them across all your social profiles that we were talking about, and even on your website. This is what we call a trade dress. We could call it a trade dress. A lot of companies do this where they'll have a brand look and feel. But you can do this on even a very minimal level. And for example, here, there's like maybe photography or maybe the kinds of visuals they might use, you know, as they start to market a possible color scheme, the kinds of like lifestyle pictures you might use. It's the whole thing about trying to align what your brand is or what you think you stand for and what's really important. So this is called a mood board. And of course, Amazon, Amazon has this kind of an arrow, a smile that becomes really important to them, that they use throughout. Something else, if you wanted, something else you could think about. So double check important information. I kind of mentioned this earlier. The whole idea about double checking your information, making sure all your phone numbers are the same across all your social platforms on your website, making sure that your addresses are consistent, making sure your hours are consistent, right? So make sure, don't confuse the consumers or who your customers might be because you're not consistent with, like, on this page it might say, you're open at 8, and on the other page it might say 8:30 or whatever. We hate that. Don't we hate that? So just be aware. That's the whole thing about trying to be as professional as possible and try to manage that information. Put yourself in the shoes of your customer. Think about why they're coming to your site and what they're looking for. A lot of it is they're wanting to know some really basic things about you, right? They're wanting to know your location. They're wanting to know your hours. They're wanting to know some real simple things. I like this picture. The guy's looking under the bed, looking for what scares him. So this whole thing about knowing your customers. So we're on Act 3. Knowing your customers. How do you know your customers? Everybody here have customers? Right? How do you define your customers? Do you have some idea of how you do that? I mean, over time, if you've been in your business long enough, you figure that out, right? How do your customers find you? I think that's really key here, is you got to know who your customers are, and then they got to be able to find you. They have to be able to find you, right? That's really key. We were talking about kind of branding before. I thought this was an interesting stat. People haven't formed up, sometimes, many times, obviously, people haven't formed an opinion yet, right? So if they're searching, remember how we talked about how people pre-qualify you? They haven't formed an opinion about you yet. When I say you, I'm talking about your reputation, your company, and all that. But they're going to, when they see your social, when they see your website, they're going to start to form that opinion. So it's important to know who your customers are and where they are. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And I have this beautiful picture of all these people. I don't think I left anybody out. Maybe I did. So what's interesting about social profiles is that we'll talk a little bit about where people are based on social profiles. Did you think I was going to talk about social profiles today when you came here? Yeah. Did you think I was just going to tell you how to put content on your website? Huh? Because we can talk about that too. But this is really important because you know what they call this, what I'm talking about? It's called digital advertising. It's the whole thing about social media. It's about how marketing has changed. Marketing's changed. This is what it's all about now. It's all about driving and pulling people through and bringing them back, and trying to find and reach your audiences. You know what? I think I backtracked here, didn't I? Okay, so I want to talk about 4 social profiles today, if I can. So 4 social profiles I think they're probably very current, most people are using. And I was curious if you guys are all familiar with these 4 social profiles. Here's the first one, Facebook. Everybody here on Facebook? Yeah. Where there's kind of a breakdown of a percentage of men and women that are on Facebook. You've also heard probably, our kids used to be on Facebook first, and then what happened was their parents and their grandparents got on Facebook, so the kids left.
They're on Snapchat.
They're all on Snapchat now. So Facebook has a huge audience, but a lot, probably, there's probably a lot of people 50 and older that's on Facebook.
Jeff, can you explain that statistic? Put that perspective.
Yeah.
How can 83% be women and 75%?
I don't know. It doesn't add up, does it?
No,
Well-
I assume there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
Well, it means that 80% of that group of women are on, so that means there's.
100% of them and 100% of men.
Yeah, so
Uh-huh.
there's two different statistics.
Uh-huh.
So out of, if you looked at all the women in the world, 83% are on Facebook, correct? Is that what
Yeah.
I was saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a high number. It's a high number. So Instagram. Anybody here familiar with Instagram? Anybody use it? You have what? Four Instagram accounts? So, anybody want to talk about Instagram? What's the strength of an Instagram account? Do you have any idea?
Photos first,
Photos first, okay?
their attention.
So it's very visual, photos first. And so you can see here, they say Instagram's kind of more for a younger crowd, so you can kind of see some of the age breaks. Listen, this is what they're saying. There's people of all ages using them, but there's a majority of people that are this age that are hitting it. They're significant. The next one. There's some breakdown for percentages. Once again, you can kind of see by gender who's using what. Anybody here use Twitter?
I have two.
You have 2 Twitters? Who likes Twitter? What's the power of Twitter? What's that?
It's instant.
It's instant, isn't it? So like I was reading an article about like food trucks out in Indianapolis, how they use Twitter because they don't always set it in the same location, but they have a following of people who like to eat lunch, on their trucks, from their trucks. And so they use Twitter to push out like where they're going to be, because it's more of an instant of information being used. So that's a way to kind of leverage Twitter. Twitter's about the moment that you're in the moment, and so if you're at a concert, I mean, we all post all the time on all the different social platforms, but Twitter's really geared for that. But look at that stat about Twitter. 29% of internet users have college degrees. That's kind of interesting. "81% of millennials check Twitter at least twice a day." So obviously millennials are using Twitter. What's the age group for millennials? You guys know? Who's a millennial here?
I have two at home.
Do you get tired of talking about millennials? You get tired of hearing the word?
I don't.
Are you a millennial?
Yeah, I wish. I have two at home, so I don't think I'm a
Yeah.
millennial. They give a refreshing perspective on things.
So here's Snapchat. Okay, I'm not on Snapchat. I don't use Snapchat. Who does? Anybody here? Talk to us a little bit about Snapchat, will you? What's great about Snapchat?
For me, it's like a personal, I'm not blasting it to everyone I follow on Snapchat, or on Twitter or Facebook. It's very personal for me. So I am only friends with the people I want to be friends with.
Yeah.
And I want them to see exactly what I'm doing at that moment.
More personalized.
But Snapchat is also about taking a picture and sending it, right?
Quickly, yeah.
And does it stay or does it goes away, right?
You can save them now.
Okay.
It used to disappear.
Right, so the controversy behind Snapchat was back in the day, like what, last year? Technology, back in the day, which was a long time ago, our children were sending naked pictures to each other all the time, and then the photos would go away.
Yep.
So I think they've probably got to try to get a handle on what that was all about. But anybody want to take that one on? What's the value of Snapchat?
I don't know.
I've seen I follow a bunch of businesses, and it's to see their product, and you see
Mhm.
One of the girls that I follow, she decorates cookies and she like Snapchats like her frosting the cookies. And for me, I like want to see what, and I bought a lot of products based on her Snapchat videos.
Better
I, like,
than
see
Twitter.
her-
Why different?
What's that?
Why different than Twitter?
Well, I think for one, it's a younger age group.
Okay.
And that's the thing I want to talk about here is if your audience, yes.
I use the Snapchat for our business,
Uh-huh.
and what I do is every day I do like Paige's product pick of the day, you know, and I put a new kombucha that we're carrying, I put a new product that I've learned about, and I put little details about, you know, this supplement's awesome because it boosts your nitrous oxide or whatever. It's
Mhm.
a way for us, or for me personally, to be able to educate people my age and younger about supplements and nutrition.
Okay.
And they're actually interested in it. Like, I have a lot of people that scroll up and say, well, what is this? And what other ways can you use this? And so
Yeah.
I take advantage of Snapchat.
So it's more interactive as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a much younger audience. And so if that's where you're trying to go and that's a target of yours, that's why I think it's relevant. Yeah.
So some success that we've had with Snapchat is doing the geo filters,
Uh-huh.
kind of using it in part of our promotion when we know that we're going to have a younger crowd,
Okay.
so that we get them more engaged.
So can you talk about geo filters for a moment?
Yes, so what it is that it's only a couple of dollars, and you actually kind of have this map area, and you zone off, like
Mhm.
we do it for the farm tour, and we have a couple hundred people that would just take pictures, and then we just kind of have hashtags. What it is that I design like a element or something, some kind of neat little picture frame, and then when they swipe, they can use that particular one.
So is that like push notifications? Is that what we're talking about?
I don't think it's push notifications,
Mhm.
it's just picture filters.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can advertise your event. I know Hype uses it. We'll put it on an event. We'll have a Snapchat filter, and we'll tell people throughout the night use the Snapchat filter, and then they're blasting it to all their friends. And
Mhm.
it's got our logo right there on it.
Okay.
And so they're going, oh, Hype kids are having fun tonight. Like, I want to be a part of that. I want
Yeah.
to go to that next event.
Okay, so here's the kicker on all this that I've told you. For those of you who are using multiple social sites, answer this question for me. Do you use the same information across all your sites? Are you making the same entries? Are you basically creating one message and reusing it on all your sites?
With Instagram, because you can post to Instagram and share it, and you can share it to Twitter as
Right.
well.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about though,
Attach a
like
link to it.
crossing over, like
Yeah.
if you had Snapchat, if you had, all these different, because, here's the thing. A lot of your customers are on multiple sites, they're on multiple social pages. And so I believe you shouldn't be doing the same thing because they're seeing your stuff over and over. And if they're seeing the same thing, they're going to quit looking at you.
When you just said there's different age ranges, so you think you would customize the message?
Exactly. And that's why I want to bring it up. There's different age ranges,
Yeah.
right? And so you need to customize your message. You need to be aware of it. And that's the reason why I bring it up. I want you to think about that as you're talking to different audiences. How do you talk to them? How they like to be talked to? The formality of it all. Being empathetic or being an advocate or whatever. Your language is really important. We'll talk about that if I have time. We'll talk about that a little bit. All right, Act 4, make a plan, create a relevant fresh graphics, and let's have a schedule. Can we do that? Can we get a schedule together? So this is really important. So like we create a lot of websites at IronGate, and the thing that is frustrating from our perspective is that a lot of smaller companies, because we have limited resources. They have limited resources too. It's like it gets to be kind of hard and it gets to be embarrassing sometimes because they don't have someone dedicated to it. They don't have someone that's like it's part of their job responsibility. So guess what happens? It gets neglected, right? And so we call that erosion. Like we build a site and then it just erodes away because there isn't someone owning it. There's not someone that has to be responsible for it. And so I really try to emphasize that when I start talking with companies. about, this needs to be part of someone's job description. It needs to be owned by somebody, and someone needs to be held accountable for it. And then because of that, then what starts to happen is there might be a plan. There might actually be a plan in place. And that's what we're talking about. Create a plan. Like, how many times do you guys post a week when you put content out? Do you have like a regular schedule that you try to post? How many times do you post?
I try to post daily.
Okay. But see, he's a marketing guy working for an organization that's hired him to do that, right? What if you don't have a marketing guy and you're doing it yourself? That's when the struggle starts to happen, is like trying to come up with relevant content. And then I just told you not to send the same content across all platforms, didn't I? Man, that's hard. That's why some people start to say, this is ridiculous. I can't do all this. It just overwhelms me. And so my answer to that is know your limitations, right? Simplify it. Be good at one instead of trying to be mediocre at all four. If you have to just pick one, then knock it out of the park. But find your resource, define your resources for what you've got to do. This is why it's so important. There's so many people that are using it. That's the whole thing again about being professional. You're being judged, right? Remember, you're being judged. And that's the thing. We as Americans, I believe that we have a very sophisticated visual palette. And what I mean is that there's quite a bit of us that probably can't read very well, but we are exposed to like a lot of media. We're exposed to so much rich graphics, and we've seen a lot of rich visuals. And so I think that like ups the game in terms of really having people look at your stuff who are kind of familiar with like what rich graphics or rich media looks like. And so I think that it's important to really get a handle on it. So let me get on my right page here. I have some other things I want to talk about. So we're trying to make a plan. We're trying to make a relevant plan. And I have on here in my notes, I wanted to kind of just briefly talk about how when you try to build a brand, how you have to use consistent language and consistent visuals that also kind of reinforce your ideas about who you are, right? And how you're viewed. What is a brand anyway? Anybody know? What's a brand? Is it your logo? A lot of people think it's your logo. It's part of it. Yeah. It's a combination of things. Yeah. It's your reputation. It's your reputation. And here's the kicker. Who owns your brand? You don't own it, okay? You don't own it. Your customers own your brand. Your customers, isn't that ironic? Your customers own your reputation. Because how you treat your customers and like how they come in contact with you is how your brand is formed. So what's really cool here is that branding, a lot of times, it's really like a study of culture, is what it is. Because it's all about human interaction. And so we'll get called in to do work for a client where we want to redo their logo, maybe develop a tagline and all that. And we start talking about reputation. We start talking about branding. We move in and we start doing some interviews with their clients. And we start finding out things, right? And we start finding out there's issues with an organization. And it's all about how they do business. It's all about how they treat their customers. It's all about that contact. So who here has had like a bad experience with a company? What do you normally do when you have a bad experience? To who? Huh? I can't hear you. Okay, leave a review. What else? What else do you do? Who do you complain to? Management. There you go. Friends and family, right?
Everybody who'll listen on Facebook.
Right. So that becomes, that's what we're talking about here, is like how your brand, it's about your reputation, so it starts to spread. And so, and as a company too, your customers know who you are, so you can't stake a claim, or you can't stake that you're something if you're not, right? So if you have bad customer service and you come out and market that you have good customer service, what will your customers think about you? You are a liar. Yes. You don't want to be a liar. It's not good for business. And so you have to be very careful about that. And so when you're creating this brand look and feel, or this palette, this visual palette, you have to be aware of your reputation. Now, how do you find out? How do you find out what your reputation is? Yeah. Do you know that everybody here has a brand, a personal brand? And if I could get to your friends, I could find out who you are. I could find out what kind of person you are. Like, let's talk about high school for a moment. In high school,
Let's not.
you have, what do you have in high school? You have like the band people, you have the jocks, you have the brainiacs, you have the goths, you have, I'm sure there's other categories. You can categorize people, right? And so a lot of times we try to fit into those categories, or we put people in those, we try to peg them in some way. And so, so we start to have this kind of, we try to find where our fit is. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like each of us also are known for something. I was the art guy when I was in high school, right? I could always draw, and so I was the art guy. But there's people who are funny, you name it. We know what we're talking about, right? And so we're all known for something. And so the best way, and your companies are also known for something. And so what can happen here is that just ask your customers what your reputation is. Sometimes they'll tell you. And that's why we get involved at IronGate, because sometimes our clients, their customers won't tell them because maybe there's something wrong. So it's easier for them to tell like a third party like us than telling them direct. And so sometimes we'll get information, from a client, from a customer that maybe our customer couldn't pull. And so, because sometimes there's a lot at risk, right? But so ask that, and then try to understand what that is, because what's that got to do? What does that have to do with a website, right? It's really important, because all that language needs to reinforce. It needs to align, and you need to think about it on a very broad scale. We were helping a company not too long ago decide if they wanted to be still in their building because it was in a bad location somewhere. And somebody in my family said, because they knew we do graphic design and stuff, and they asked me, they said, well, how's business? I said, well, I've just been working on this project to help this company try to decide whether they're going to stay in their building. And my relative looked at me and said, what's that got to do with graphic design? What does that have to do with design? And I said, it has a lot to do with design. Because I have to craft a message, I have to help craft a message and an image for this business. And so we had to find out whether their location was hurting their business or not. So we asked. You know what their customer said? Are my rates going to go up because you're wanting to move? Right? Yeah. So check your links. Like when you guys, here's the other thing. So like when you do social, you want to use links to your website, right? So you want to set up links. You want to send people, like I told you, you want to pull people back to your website. So you want to make sure all your links are good. They're not broken. Check all those links all the time. That's very important. So this lady's upset because, daggone it, content's not good. She's upset. The links are broken. Things aren't consistent. She can't get the answers that she needs. You're not professional enough, right? And what's going to happen? She's going to go to your competitor. That's all there is to it. Okay, I'm on my 5th act here. track your analytics, okay? Google Analytics. I like to share this stat because analytics are important. So what are analytics? Anybody look them up? Do you look up analytics? Okay, so what's great about digital advertising and social is this ability to track data, okay? So what's wrong with traditional marketing? Traditional marketing is that there's this kind of level of accountability that's a struggle. Like, okay, I paid for this brochure, but did it really do anything? Did it really help in direct in a sale or whatever? And you can build some traditional stuff around periods of time where you can see if there were sales or purchases made when that thing came out. So there are ways to track. But what's really cool about digital is that you have this ability to like track if it made a difference, if it drove people, if you pulled people through, if they made a purchase. Like if you have, for example, an e-commerce website and you're selling product online, then that ability to be able to track, that campaign that we ran, whether it was through social or we ran some digital ads online, did it impact that? And did we get direct sales from it? So what's important about that is if you have to be accountable to management, or also if you're planning budgets and you're wanting to know, how much to buy when you're like trying to buy ads online, there's a price for all that. And so the more that you can see how it's impacting, the more it's important. And so this whole thing about accountability becomes really important. But also you got to have some method of knowing what to do. And like when you run digital ads, some of the stuff I've been reading about is not just run one ad, but test your ads. If you're doing it over periods of weeks, create 4 different ads with 4 different languages and run them and see which ones perform better and change it up. That's the beauty about it. Like in the old print days, you could only do it once, right? What's nice now is you have the flexibility to build 3 or 4 versions of it, use different pictures, use different language, and see which one pulls. So you have that flexibility built in, which is really nice. So analytics. Here's a picture of like what analytics might look like if you're on Google. So Google does a great job. They have, if you're on Google, they track all of that for you. So there's just a ton of analytics. And so this next one is collecting customer feedback. Okay? Anybody do that online? Like on your website, do you have a place where they can make comments and write to you? And do you follow that and do you respond to it? Do you do surveys on your website? It's important. Customer feedback is really important. What do you do when a client complains? Do they ever complain online to you? How do you address it? Do you address it or do you just let it go?
Address it.
Immediately? Is that what you said? Right. That whole thing about being empathetic is very important. Plus, if that person has that bad experience, remember I was telling you like what happens when you get mad at a company? What do? They go out and start talking and saying things about you to their friends. Anybody who'll listen to them, they'll rant and rant and rant, because they have the power now, don't they? And so it's important. What do we all want? We all want to be heard, don't we? That's what we want. We all want to be heard. An empathetic ear is important. Even if they're wrong, you still need to listen. So it's very important. You know what? I think I jumped around and I missed. I think I blew past where we were talking about the Google. Well, I know we talked about it. The Google part. Let's see. I wanted to show you this. I think I blew past this one. When we're talking about my business, so now I'm stepping back in my presentation. I wanted you to see this. So this is Iron Gate's page. So when you Google my business, right, this is what it looks like. There's always on the right-hand corner of if you go to Google and if you have claimed Google My Business, or you have a website that's on this will pop up, right? And what's nice about this, and this is what we learned about, was there's all this information here. You can get directions, you can go to a website, you can see pictures of, this is my business, by the way, okay? There's hours listed, there's an address, but what's also cool, which I didn't really know, is that like on Google My Business, they were talking about how you can actually communicate with people through this window, right? Which I thought was really fascinating, the idea of like doing text back and forth and starting a conversation with someone and running ads. You can even run some ads in this space, which is pretty cool. And it's all free. That's right. So this tool is really powerful, especially if you don't have a website. This is a little mini website in a lot of ways, which is pretty neat. So have you been to your Google page to see what you look like? You need to do that. Okay, so now, sorry, I jumped around there. Just some other thought. I have some, I'm calling these survival considerations. The first one, we were talking about earlier, about a visual palette or starting to put some brand standards together. So this is what this is. So this might be like an identity manual for yourself, or for your social, or for your. This is just an example, like kinds of type style you might use, or for your website, a color palette that you might be using. I mean, it could even go, like, for example, if you were, let's just say you're a company that focuses on customer attentiveness, right? Customer attentiveness. What kind of words reflect or reinforce the idea of attentiveness, right? So, and then those are kinds of words that you should be using in your language when you're talking to your customers, right? So what you could do is, like, I used to work for a company where customer attentiveness was part of our brand. And so we actually created a list of words that we were supposed to use on a daily basis, like in our writing, that would help reinforce that whole customer attentiveness idea. And also, what is customer attentiveness? It's the whole thing about service, right? It's about how to serve people. Not only on outside customers, but inside customers. So like when we did customer attentiveness training, there were 15,000 people that went through training. The thing that you had to understand was, just because you worked in-house and your client was sitting across the hallway or the aisle from you, they were still your client. And how you treated them, even though you were equal employees, you should treat them like they were your customer, right? And so that whole idea behind all that. So like when you build a website, I'm going to get random on you here, okay? So when you build a website, first of all, I want to share a book with you. Anybody read this book? Go buy it, okay? I'm in love with this book. I've read it like 3 times, okay? It's called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. Donald likes to talk about some things I think are really important. The first one is that customers don't care about you. They care about themselves. They don't want to hear your story. They want to hear about how you're going to make them successful, right? They're going to want to know why your product is going to benefit them. He makes a really good point. Make the customer the hero. You are not the hero. Don't act like you're the hero, right? You're the guide, and that's what he talks about in here. The guide, watch any movie. He talks about movie scripts. The hero has always got a problem. The hero either is like they lack confidence, or there's a certain skill they don't have. Let's look at Rocky. Who was the hero in Rocky? Was it Sylvester Stallone? Yeah. Who was the guide in Rocky? Who was the person with real authority in Rocky? Mickey, right? It was Mickey, the trainer. He had the authority. You want to be Mickey. You want to be the guide, because that's where the real power is being the guide. And you do that by being empathetic, by being an advocate, by trying to help your customers, right? And they have to be focused. They have to be the focus. They have to be the hero. And what's interesting is all of our heroes, and if you look at movie scripts, all the heroes had issues. Self-doubt, lack of resources, lack of, you name it. And there's always a guide. There's always a guide that's going to help them through that journey, right? Which I thought is pretty cool. So if you want real authority, you have to be the guide. He calls that survive and thrive, by the way. Get the book, it's really good. But he also talks about like how to lay out a website. And he talks about how your website needs to have a call to action. And the call to action button should be up in the right-hand corner of your website. Okay, so there's an old line called above the fold. Above the fold is an old print reference to like the newspaper, or where when it's folded and it's on the rack, you only see that part that's above, right? It's called above the fold. We also refer to that on a website, not on a mobile, but like on a tablet or possibly on a tabletop site. Above the fold, there's a hierarchy of information. You read it like a Z, okay? That right-hand corner is very important in terms of having a call to action. And have a call to action. And make it stand out. You know, be bold. Ask for the business. Ask for the business. 5 minutes? Okay. Let's see. Video is very important. If you do any video, it's very engaging. If you look at the stats on video, it's off the charts. The number 2 search engine now is YouTube, so people want to see video. I mean, how many people YouTube everything to learn how to do something? This is incredible. So video is becoming really important. I'd love to come back and do another session on video. We do a ton of video at Iron Gate, and it's really getting a lot of good exposure. Blogging is another one that we could probably talk about all day long. What is a blog anyway? Anybody know? Anybody here blog? Okay, good. Blog is a great way to tell authentic stories. Authentic is the word. What is authentic? It's believable, right? Believable. Excuse my French, but you know that everybody raises the flag when they say, oh, that's a bunch of bull, you know what, right? When they know when you're trying to pour it on. It's the whole idea about being authentic. And so blog's a great way to do that.
One thing I add about blogging too is that it really helps with SEO.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
the more you blog, the more content you have on your site, the better.
HubSpot has a ton of like statistics about blogging because they really reinforce that. They talk about like if you blog over a certain period of times, like through the week, how much more results you get or how much more leads you get and all that kind of stuff. So people are looking for stories. That's what we're talking about here. And that's what's important is like how do you create engagement? And it's by, first of all, making it emotional, making your customers the hero, blogging, and tell those stories. Tell those stories how you were the guide, right? Kind of sounds overwhelming, doesn't it? It's not if you talk, just think about it. These are things that are really important. I get excited talking about that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm going to stop there. That's good because I think my graphic just went off. Do you guys have any questions you want to ask? I threw a lot at you today because I know you probably thought, okay, we're going to talk about websites. What I did was I talked about how all these other kind of tools become so important to your website. Like your website cannot live by itself. And so I want you to understand that. that you have to have these other channels. You've got to figure out how you can utilize some of these other channels to help you with your content. Your content, listen, if you have to put the same content on every social page, then do it. Okay? I'm just saying that's not the most ideal situation. If you have limited time and limited resources, then do it. It's probably better than nothing. Yeah.
When you said a life cycle of the website is 4 years,
Go ahead.
elaborate what you mean by that. Do you mean like you should just take it down and redo it every 4 years? Do you mean?
Or start to refresh it, or maybe, I believe that your website is like this living, breathing thing, right? And so what happens is, like, people will build their website and then they don't do anything else with it. Like they just let it sit there,
No, I get that.
and they don't add things to it, and it doesn't change. So if you don't do anything with it, when you get to be about 4 years out, you're in trouble. Because what starts to happen is links start to break down, it's not working properly. And that's the thing that we see a lot is, like, clients will come to us and say, man, our site's not working. Well, they haven't touched it for a very long time, And so we build websites at IronGate that are on WordPress platform. And so what's nice about what we try to do is give you a turnkey, so the ability to be able to, like, update your own site. So we also train and support our people or our customers, so that a lot of our clients really like WordPress because it was started out as like for blogging, but what's really good about it is how easy it is to use. It's very intuitive. And so, and plus, over 30% of websites in the whole world are being built on WordPress sites. So that means that you can find people to work on them. We've had several clients come to us because they built their website on a different platform, and then guess what? They can't find support. They can't find anybody to work on it. And so they have to pay us to convert it to WordPress, And so WordPress is important in terms of resources, making sure that there's people in your community. So and that's the thing, that's one piece of advice. If you hire a web design company to help you, find out, like, what kind of platform they're going to build it on, and find out how popular that platform is, to make sure you have resources and you have support. Because if you don't have it, then it becomes really hard if that company goes away, in terms of being able to, to build it and to support it. And so we support WordPress. We also train people on how to use it, and then we also we'll stay in touch with them. Yeah.
At WordPress, it'll say at the bottom, it'll have WordPress?
Yeah.
Okay. I was checking our website to see who created it.
Yeah. I don't know if it says at the bottom that it says WordPress.
I've seen it on other websites
Yeah.
before, and I was familiar with it
Yeah.
from earlier blogging days, but
So a lot of our clients do like WordPress, and that's what we use. And so then what we can do is we can customize WordPress. So we have the ability to do custom sites within WordPress.